Okay, so let's take a look at what you've done so far. I'm going to hide all of these layers except for the New York skyline. So the first thing you've done is you've pulled the photo in and you've resized this. This next thing that we did is we pulled this guy in, and I want to show you a couple more keyboard shortcuts to work with these layers. So on your keyboard, you have Control or Command if you're on a Mac, Alt or Option if you're on a Mac, and the Shift key. Those three keys are what are known as modifier keys. Whenever you press one or more of those, it's going to change or modify what you're clicking. So let's try that out. Go ahead and select the man layer and go ahead and press the Alt key down or Option if you're on a Mac and click on the man mask right here, the black and white piece. What this does is this shows you what has been masked. So this is a great way to find out if you had accidentally left something else not selected or if a part in the middle wasn't selected. If all of a sudden you saw a black mark in here, you would know that there was something wrong with your mask. So the Alt or Option key allows you to turn that on and off. So let's go ahead and try that. Oops, I double clicked by mistake. That'll happen. Let's go ahead and try that on the clouds layer. So now looking at this clouds layer, this is giving me an indication right here. Looks like I've got part of the wings kicking out at this bottom, and it also has that part where I missed the ear. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and clean up that part of the ear. So I'm going to take the lasso, and I'm going to zoom in a little tighter. And I'm going to drag the lasso around so that I get that part. And this side doesn't really matter because I'm going to turn that black. So now that that's filled in, I'm going to take my paintbrush. I'm going to make sure that black is selected as my foreground color. That's the top one. Your background color is this bottom one. And now I'm going to shrink my brush because my brush right now is way too big. It's 350 pixels. I shrink that down a little bit. When I'm this zoomed in, it's hard to tell using the brackets what the size of my brush is. So now I'm going to go in. If you notice what's happening is since I highlighted this area, I've made it so that the only thing that I can paint is in that area. If I come down here, notice how it's not painting. It's because the lasso acted as a mask. It acted as a barrier. It's only allowing me to click on the inside. I'm going to go ahead and press Control D to deselect that. Now I can zoom back out. And right over along this edge, I'm going to go ahead and use my lasso again. And I'm just going to do this right on that side down. I haven't let go of my mouse. I'm going to come over to this side. Now what I want to do is I want to fill that with white. So I am going to take my brush. I'm going to flip the colors. So now white is the color I'm painting with. And notice by having that lasso there, it's blocking my ability to paint white outside. So even if I'm dragging into his body, it's not disappearing. I'll press Control D, press Control 0, and I bring it back out. Now let's go ahead and press the Alt key and click on the wings. So I can zoom in. And you can see that selection did a pretty good job in getting these edges. So I like what happened there. Up here, you notice I missed a little bit of that edge. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that part up. So I'm going to take the lasso again so I can protect that edge. I'm just going to draw a little straight line across there. And now I've still got the white as my foreground. I want to make sure I'm on the mask, not on the picture. I'm on the mask. I press Alt to reveal it. Now I'm going to take the paintbrush, go ahead and fill that in, and I press Control D, and that deselects it. So now I've cleaned up those masks. Now what I want to do is let's try another keyboard shortcut. Hold down the Shift key and click on the wings mask. Oops, got to turn the visibility on. I forgot to turn that on. Let's turn all those layers on. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key. I'm going to click on it. So what this is doing is it is turning the mask off. So if I hide these other layers, this is temporarily turning that mask off so you can see if anything's missing. Sometimes it helps to turn it on and off just to see if something shows up weird in a different area, like extra pixels that you may have forgotten to actually mask. So let's do the same thing with this guy here. I'm going to click on the mask. I'm going to hold down the Shift key. And I'm going to click on the mask again. So what this does is it temporarily hides the photo. Or sorry, hides the mask. It's been a long day. There we go. And then birds. And what I'm going to do, click on that and click on that to close it. Since I have a blending mode on this one, it's going to do something a little bit different when I hold down the Shift key. Notice how it's messing up his hand. It's because I'm turning off the mask that's there. So really the key thing that I want you to get out of this is you have 3 modifier keys: the Control key, the Alt key, and the Shift key. And when you do that and you click on a mask, the Alt key will show you what's on the mask. The Shift will hide the mask. And the Control will actually reload that section. So that's what we ended up doing to make the clouds so that you could have both the bird and the man on the clouds mask. As we go along, that stuff will make more sense. I'm not expecting you to memorize every keyboard shortcut, but that'll definitely help save you some time. All right, let's go ahead and apply a special effect to this background, this skyline. So I'm going to turn off these layers temporarily. I just held my mouse button down here and drug up. You could click one at a time, but if you click off to the side slightly, you can drag, and you can drag. It just saves you some time. Let's duplicate this layer. So I'm going to drag and drop it onto the new layer. And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to play around with putting a special effect on this. So there's some built-in filters. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to look at some of these. Some of these, like people will want to do 3D, I would hold off. The 3D capability in Photopea is really weak. There's blurring. You can pinch and distort, and you can add noise to your image. You can turn things, you can pixelate things, meaning you make them more squared. This will let you actually create clouds or lens flares. You can sharpen images, but there's also this filter gallery. Let's go ahead and turn that one on. All right, I'm going to press Control minus a few times just to zoom out a little bit and see if it'll let me do that here. Let me try Control minus. Looks like that keyboard shortcut is not one that's in Photopea. That's in Photoshop. So we'll go ahead and just drag this around a little bit. So this one right now is using the glowing edges effect. Not really what I'm looking for, but kind of interesting. Each one of these filters has different sliders that you can use, but it looks like it's really kind of bogging the website down. Notice it's still trying to do something. So this may not be the best thing to experiment with if you've got a slower internet connection. But you can see there's other effects. There's a splatter, strokes, bas relief. You can do photocopy. Photocopy is kind of an interesting one. Get some really strong contrast and stuff on there. Now, this by itself isn't really that interesting, but what we can do is you can apply multiple ones on top of each other, and we'll experiment more with those. You may want to consider opening up just a single image and going to filters and experimenting. I'm going to go ahead and turn this one off. It doesn't have as many options as Photoshop does, but there are some pretty nice built-in ones. What I don't like is how slow this actually is. Come on. So I'm just going to go ahead and click OK because it wasn't letting me do anything from that. Okay, so what we're going to do instead is we're going to try one of these built-in filters here. So I'm going to go to Stylize. I want to find the outlines of this building. So I'm going to do Find Edges. What this did is it found these little edges along the sides of the building, and it's created almost like a coloring book kind of effect. But that in and of itself really isn't overwhelmingly interesting. It's okay. You can experiment with some of these blending modes just to see what happens. So now it's looking more like an illustration. It's applying these different effects so you can start to see some interesting things. Like, that's pretty interesting. I kind of like some of the effect that's happening there. In fact, Let's try a linear dodge. So these are variable depending on what image you have. Sometimes overlay can be interesting. That's kind of cool. So some of this becomes a personal preference, definitely. But I think what I like on this particular one, I like this linear dodge. I want to have this kind of outline. But what I don't want to have is I don't want it applied to the entire image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mask, but I'm going to do a different kind of mask this time. I'm going to go ahead and add the mask, and I'm going to come over here to the gradient tool. A gradient's like ombre for like hair, where it goes from one color smoothly blended into another. So you did that with the text effect, but for this one, we're going to use black and white. So go ahead and switch this. So black is your foreground, white is your background. So if you remember looking at these masks, black hides. So that's the darker, it's like the dark. And then when you turn the light on, you reveal what's on that layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this black to white. I'm going to take this gradient and I'm going to try, I don't know, holding my mouse button down right here at the top of the building and kind of bringing it down here towards the bottom of the building near where this white line is. So I'm just kind of guessing. So what that just did is it made it so that in this top area, the color was revealed, in this bottom, it wasn't. Now you could take this gradient tool again and just kind of experiment. You could try it in the opposite direction just to see what happens. The shorter you go, the quicker it transitions from color to the reveal the drawing effect. If I go this way, that's kind of interesting. So I'm going to have this kind of pull this down to where it's looking at this building. It's about half of the building is drawn and half of the building is in color. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn these back on. Now, one of the things that's happening that I don't like is where the clouds are down here. So what I'm going to do is on this cloud layer, I'm going to add an additional mask. I'm going to grab this paintbrush. I'm going to lower the opacity so it's not quite as strong. And I'm going to lower the hardness so it has a soft edge, meaning it's going to be more like a spray can instead of like a hole puncher. And now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make my brush much larger. So I'm going to try, I don't know, about 700 or so. With black highlighted, now I'm going to come around and just kind of tap along where this straight line is. That straight line is really throwing off the illusion of it actually being buildings. And come up here kind of towards the wings so I can get a bit more of the buildings. And then I have the clouds kind of coming through there. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I just realized I didn't need that. Let's go ahead and dump that layer. I clicked on the wrong one. So really the mask that we just made, that's what it looks like. It's the original guy and then a couple little pieces of the brush being applied. In fact, I can click down here just to make that part kind of more solid. There we go. And then I'm going to fade this layer out just a little bit. I'm going to lower the opacity. Right now, I think the drawing is too strong. So I'm going to pull that down just a little bit, maybe like 50% or so. So we get this outline, maybe a little bit more. Let's bring that back up a little bit. I don't know, that looks pretty cool. So we'll pull that one up. All right, so now I'm going to change this to New York Draw, just so we have a different name for that. And that's enough for now. In the next tutorial, we're going to go in, we're going to change the color of his hat. We will play around with the lighting of the wings, and then we will start to add in some text. And we're almost ready to wrap this one up.